Tell your story.
Change the conversation.
Organized by students.
TEDxYouth at SHC.
So, I was walking home one day, minding my own business like any other angsty teenager in their sophomore year of high school, with my earbuds on, listening to the hit tunes of the time. Then, suddenly, a group of 5 middle schoolers completely surround me, and I just stand there, dazed. I had no idea what was going on. Then, they start badgering me with insults. One boy repeatedly says, "Ni hao, ni hao." Another one is asking how my calculus homework was. Another is asking if I had rice for lunch that day. Different stereotypes were being thrown at me that I just stand there, not really sure as to how I'm supposed to respond. When they saw that I wasn't reacting to their jeering, they made some passing comment on how Asian and serious I was for not being able to take a joke, and walked away. After they left, I was finally taken out of my stupor. What in God's name just happened? After I got over the irritation, the disbelief, the discomfort, I began to realize that there was a problem. And the problem didn't just come from the fact that 5 middle schoolers were throwing racial slurs at me, but more so from the fact that these middle schoolers were also Asian. Let that sink in for a second. These middle schoolers were making fun of me for being Asian and making fun of our heritage and culture as if it wasn't theirs. But what scared me the most was that I saw myself within them. I saw their attempts of pushing away their heritage and culture as far away as possible, as a reflection of my own struggles that I went through, starting their age and continue to face throughout high school. Now, I believe the source of this struggle is the lack of Asian representation within the media and the curriculum. Because the Asian American community has been considered the invisible minority for far too long. Because despite the fact that we are present within the American culture, we're often disregarded during the discussion of race and overlooked by both white people and people of color. When we are seen, however, it's only through the lens of prejudices and stereotypes. Even Asian Americans themselves are passive towards this inaccurate portrayal to the point in which we take part in making fun of ourselves. First, let's talk about the media. Let it be in the comforts of our home, scrolling through our phones, or in the car listening to the radio. We are always somehow engaging with the media and are bombarded with information after information about a myriad of topics. When we hear something over and over again, we internalize it and we begin to view it as the truth. So growing up, I loved to watch TV. I did my absolute best to spend as much of my time in front of it, even if it were to watch those reruns of those awfully boring shows. But as I would switch through different channels, the same theme would appear. There were no Asians. Because of this, slowly without even realizing it, my definition of what being a typical American meant was to be white. And I'm sure you've realized by now, I'm not white. I'm Chinese. So I grew up in this perpetual gray area, not really knowing as to where I stood. I wasn't exactly Asian because the culture outside of my home wasn't. But I, by my definition then, wasn't American. So what I did was that I tried my best to be white. I did whatever I could to just fit in and be deemed as cool and normal, even if it was at the price of my own culture, my own identity, and my own happiness. Now people might argue, but there is representation. Have you not seen Mulan, Rush Hour? Well, I have 2 things to say to that. First, With the exception of an extremely small number, movies and TV shows tend to only have one Asian American supporting character, if any at all, each playing to the same story. If it was in a high school setting, they were the nerds in the back of the AP Calc class who always got straight A's. If it was in a business setting, they were either the janitors with heavy accents or just another socially awkward worker in the background. That's it. These were the only stories about the Asian American experience that people were exposed to, and sadly, these became my definition of what being Asian meant, and I hated it. These stereotypes only made me embarrassed to be myself. Now, secondly, with the little representation that we do have, well, they're only of some East Asians, meaning Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. You have to understand that there's so much more to Asia than these three countries, yet all these people are being left out. So in the end, no, there is barely enough Asian representation within the media because the little amount we do have are only of some Asians. Now, the issue of representation isn't limited to the media either. It is prevalent in schools as well. The purpose of education isn't just to teach us how atoms bond or how to find the theme of a poem, but rather it's about the practical skills we gain so that we can apply them to society and better understand the world around us. Education gives us the power to question society and acknowledge its faults. With this in mind, there needs to be more representation to help fight the preconceived notions that many people, including Asian Americans themselves, have towards Asians, so that the single story that pushes many Asian Americans away from their heritage can finally be destroyed. By increasing representation, we help Asian Americans from a younger age to feel more included within the conversation and to become more comfortable with themselves. We read so many books in English and history classes, mainly talking about the white experience. Yet rarely do we learn about the Asian or Asian American experience until we reach our high school years. By that point, many have already internalized the fact that we simply aren't part of the conversation. We feel as if we're only supposed to be part of the background. I have friends who feel uncomfortable whenever the Asian experience is even mentioned within classes, simply because they're not used to their culture being brought up within a classroom setting. They have disassociated their lifestyles at home with their lifestyles at school, feeling as if it's normal for classes to never talk about their own lives. But this shouldn't be the case. We need to be more exposed to the incredible stories, such as the noble Japanese soldiers that continued to fight for America during World War II, or the first Asian American voted into Congress in 1957, an Indian American, Dalip Sand. When we are more exposed to these stories, we can replace the complacent attitude that many people associate with the title, The Invisible Minority and the Model Minority. We can finally understand the huge impact we had on America in the past and the enormous power we have to make change. So, how can we change this discrepancy, this lack of representation in the media and curriculum, so that the future generations can have the confidence and courage to raise their voices, so that more than one story is being heard? My solution? We as Asian Americans need to reform representation on our own terms. We understand the Asian narrative the best since we live it, so we should be the ones to decide how we should be represented. The little amount of representation we do have reflects on how our current society views us. which may not be completely false, but it's not even close to the whole story. Once we take the counter-narrative into our own hands, we reform Asian representation to more positively reflect our own experiences. The more we talk about our passions and our experiences, the more Asian Americans can feel that they have a right to be included in the conversation. By increasing representation, we feel like we no longer have to be invisible, so that the future generations don't have to go through the same struggles I had to go through. They don't have to feel that they have to identify themselves as only Asian or only American at the price of losing a part of themselves, but rather they can say with confidence, I am Asian American. Thank you.